just want to walk out.
Canon Dombek is an Episcopal priest with over 31 years of experience in serving as lead pastor, school chaplain, and upper school instructor and associate priest for Episcopal congregations in Episcopal schools in Dallas, Texas, in Jenkinsville, Columbia, and Greenville, South Carolina, and Sun City West, Arizona. Timothy also served 6 years as canon to the ordinary to the Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Arizona and 3 years as canon for Stewardship and Planned Giving, working on strategic planning and stewardship development or fundraising, planned giving, and volunteer development in congregations in Arizona, and has presented stewardship training in over 20 different dioceses in the Episcopal Church. In 2014, along with co-author Mike Durall, Canon Dombek wrote the book, Making the Annual Pledge Drive Obsolete: How Churches Can Get Out of the Business Once and for All, available from Amazon.com on Kindle and used. Canon Dombek is a trained facilitator in participatory strategic planning methods and consensus decision-making for groups from the Institute for Cultural Affairs, a globally focused consulting process for not-for-profit organizations, faith-based groups, and ministries based in Chicago, Illinois. He also holds an executive certificate in religious fundraising from the Lake Institute on Faith and Giving, part of the Lilly Endowment Group, in partnership with the Indiana University School of Philanthropy in Indianapolis, Indiana. Timothy is also one of the co-creators of and a graduate of and a diocesan respondent presenter for the Best Skills, Best Churches program for not-for-profit management training for congregations, developed jointly by the Episcopal Diocese of Arizona and Arizona State University, Lodestar Center for Philanthropy and Nonprofit Innovation in Phoenix, Arizona. Canon Dombek has been married for 33 years to his wife, Beth, and they have one adult son who was born with Down syndrome and is absolutely amazing. Please welcome Canon Timothy Dombek.
Almost didn't recognize that guy. That was quite an introduction, but it's great to be back with you. How many of you were here 7 years ago when I was here at council, just out of curiosity? Okay, so some jokes are in play again. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm just grateful to be back, grateful to be invited back, and also you have an amazing staff person in Lynn Farland. She and I served together on the TENS board, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. And she kind of took over one of my spots, which is, I was on that board for 9 years, ready to do something different. And one thing that Bishop didn't say was, I just retired December 31st. So I'm excited to be here and to be with you and not have to worry about church tomorrow or who's doing it. So let us pray. Lord Jesus Christ, you are the light of the world. Fill our minds with your peace. Infuse our hearts with your love. And make our hands ready to serve for your name's sake. Amen. So I want to start with a true story. This has probably happened to some of you, but sometimes in church you might find yourself in a conversation. When was the last time we saw so-and-so, It's been a while. And I have a friend who was in one of the dioceses I have been in. Her name is Janine. By the way, changed the name and the name of the church on purpose. And Janine was very involved in her church. She came into the Episcopal Church as an adult. She was moved by the liturgy, by the respect for Scripture, and just by the whole package. And she also happened to possess a seminary degree in religion and fine arts. And so she became involved with Christian formation, and eventually Janine became the leader of the Christian formation program for adults in that church. And then as life does, life stepped in, and she found herself going through some personal and family crises. Her marriage ended, and she found herself going to church less and less, and finally not at all. And when her faith was at its lowest point, she felt like she had no place to go. But what surprised Janine the most was that nobody from the church called her. So nobody seemed to notice that she had stopped going. And she kind of made up her mind, well, I think I'll just wait and see how long it takes, for somebody to call me. Now, like clockwork, she faithfully received her pledge drive letter with the pledge card in it, addressed Dear Member of All Saints, which is the death knell of all pledge drives. You never just say Dear Member of whatever. It's always a mail merge thing. If you can't do that, get out of the business, okay? Dear Member of All Saints. And so she would send that letter and that pledge card to the wastebasket, and basically along with her membership at All Saints Church. It was an anonymous thing, and she felt anonymous. And for 3 years it was that way, and finally in the 4th year she found a new church that did acknowledge her and did care for her, and she's getting the spiritual sustenance and feeding that she needs. But what's sad about this story is the loss of Janine from All Saints Church was entirely preventable. Let me ask you a question. Has your church lost any Janines over the last few years or the last few months? And I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about people who are active and then are suddenly not so active. We've seen in the church, across the church, something the bishop the other night at dinner called a holy pruning, where about 30% of people who used to go to church don't go now. And I was an active parish priest, and I was just at Advent. By the way, our church is Church of the Advent, but we did business as Advent Episcopal Church to put our name at the top of the list of churches. Don't laugh. That resulted in getting an amazing couple who joined us because they literally started in the phone book, Advent, came to Advent, never went to another church, thank God, because they're really involved. But at any rate, at Advent, where was I going with this? We really need, we've noticed that about a third of the people stop, not a third, about 30%, that's about a third, stop going. And what I discovered by asking was they realized they didn't need church anymore. They found out that it just wasn't that important to them. And that's sad, but also the flip side of that was the people who were coming back to church after COVID wanted to be there, which is a good thing. They wanted to be there, and they were giving strongly. In fact, I don't know if this was your experience, but we had the strongest pledge fulfillment the 2 years of COVID when we were basically not in church that we ever had. It was amazing because people knew they needed to keep the doors going, they needed to pay the staff, and so we had that happen. And so like the bishop said this morning, people are giving at a higher rate even though fewer people are attending. But this thing with Janine could have actually been prevented. Who are you not seeing in church these days? Now, this happened in the news recently. Maybe you remember this. I didn't know that a Muppet could Twitter or tweet or whatever. It's X now, but I didn't even know he had opposable thumbs to be able to do this on a smartphone. But Elmo asked, and just checking in, how is everybody doing? And this made the news, of course. But what was interesting is that some people actually took that question seriously and answered very openly about how they're doing in their life. And I got to thinking, this is really indicative of what we as human beings need. Some of you know our friend Brene Brown, who does attend an Episcopal church in Houston. I don't know if she's become Episcopalian, but I know she goes there. And in her book, Daring Greatly, she writes, connection, along with love and belonging, which are two expressions of connection, is why we are here. She means as human beings. It is what gives purpose and meaning to our lives, connection. And that's why I believe the church is uniquely poised to fulfill that need in so many different ways. So one of the first things I want to do is disabuse you of the idea that stewardship is only about money and about raising money. Stewardship, first and foremost, is our love for others in action. We are called to care for the people that are entrusted to us in our parishes and our missions. That's our job. Number one job, to care for people, to make sure they know that we notice them, we notice when they're not there, and we care for them. In their book, A Church Beyond Belief, there is no more urgent need today than the need to belong. And I think coming out of COVID, this is especially true. People wanted to get back to church. They wanted to see people. Zoom in and of itself is a wonderful tool, but it doesn't replace the face-to-face community that church can offer. And actually, I need to be careful saying that, because in Sun City West, which is where Advent, my former parish, is located, it's a Del Webb retirement community, 55 plus. It's not a gated community, but if you're not 55, you can't spend more than a few weeks there. And what was interesting was we had a couple find our streamed services. We started streaming. How many of you, by show of hands, streamed your services during COVID? You streamed them. Raise them high so I can see. Okay, because she's right about the lights. Now, lower your hand if you stop streaming, just out of curiosity. Are you still streaming? Good. That's good. That's an important thing. Well, there was this couple who lived less than a mile from Advent in Sun City West who found our church on the stream. And they joined our church on the through the live stream, and they pledged and they give, and they've never come to church. They still haven't come to church, but they never missed church. And when I left, they said the nicest thing in the comments about the stream, we're going to miss you so much, So they're members, and I have to acknowledge that for some people that works really well. Maybe I don't know anything about whether they had the health need for that, but they became members through streaming. So it's important for us to recognize that that's worked for some people. But I want to talk to you about something I mentioned 7 years ago, but briefly. I looked back at my presentation. I only covered this in one slide. I want to talk about a ministry that you can do, a lay ministry. By the way, everything I'm talking about today, it doesn't matter what size of church you are, you can do this, okay? So you don't have to be a big, wealthy church to do this. Everything I'm talking about is applicable to your congregation. And the ministry is called Telecare. Telecare really helped Advent during the pandemic because what it is a phone call of love. And it works like this. You take volunteers. Now, this is a lay-driven ministry. So clergy, I want you to exhale right now. Okay. Once you recruit the leadership, you will have to recruit the leadership, but once you recruit the leadership and you get them up and running, you don't have to worry about a thing. They will take care of it. But it's a lay ministry phone call of love. It was started in California by a deacon named Fran Sweet and a priest named David Davidson Method. I always give credit. This isn't my thing, but I picked it up and run with it because it works. So Telecare, you simply are tending to people's relationships in the church. And here's how it works. It's this simple. You go through and you call the entire membership of the church on a routine basis with one question. And this is the only thing you can ask. We're calling to see how you are, and if there's anything you want us to pray for. So it's not unlike Elmo, but it's a little deeper, okay? We're calling to see how you are, and if there's anything you want us to pray for. Now, that's a profound question to ask people. And so what Telecare is not is you can never ask about money or anything. You don't guilt people about church attendance, or you don't even say that I saw you last Sunday or whatever. You don't promote church events. It's not a counseling or a hotline service. You certainly don't gossip about me losing more hair. You just call and say, how are you doing? Is there anything you want us to pray for? Who would you want involved in Telecare? First of all, people who can actually listen and who can pray with others and pray for others. Now, I know this sounds almost impossible, but I know there are Episcopalians who can pray spontaneously. I've seen it happen. It's not that rare, but it's kind of rare. It's kind of the indigo bunting of the prayers in the Episcopal Church, But you can see it. People can pray spontaneously. But you can also collect, and I'm going to give you everything, by the way, that you're seeing today. You're going to get an email, and you're also getting a packet about Telecare. It includes the story about Janine and how it works, and it's got a sample script in it, and the things you need to raise up your own ministry. Every congregation is going to get one of these. All of you don't need it, but each congregation is going to get this in your email. Then assured me that that'll be mailed to you. And you just call and you ask, how are you doing? And you want people who can do some prayers with them on the phone. It should be helpful that you're good on the phone. You have to be able to keep confidences. I think that's important. Be calm and non-reactive. Some people will tell you some amazing things, and you have to be able to write down some things on a form because you want to be able to let people know who you called and where you stopped. So how do you do it? Well, you have to determine that for your parish. A larger parish is going to take longer time to get through the directory. A smaller parish could get through the directory maybe in 4 or 5 weeks. It just depends on how often you want to do it. Ideally, when this started before COVID, I asked my telecare callers to come to the church and call from there because caller ID would show up on the phones of people and they wouldn't feel like they're being telemarketed, but it's the church calling. However, during COVID, our callers called from home on their cell phone, and I guess people were desperate to talk to somebody because we were all, sequestered, we were all being quarantined, and so it really did work even during COVID by calling on cell phone. And you have to track, who you called and what the response was. You might have, left a message or you didn't reach anybody or nobody answered. And sometimes there's pastoral information that needs to be passed on to clergy. And you ask them, do you want me to tell the rector about that? Do you want me to tell, Mother so-and-so about that? And that form always came to me on a pink piece of paper. So when I saw a pink piece of paper in my box, I grabbed it immediately because I knew that was a telecare pastoral thing that I needed to tend to. But telecare is an amazing thing. The key benefits of this is that all the members are called. You don't discriminate. Whether you see them in church or not, you just call them. You don't want to discriminate on this. If they're in your membership database, even as what some churches call permanent visitor, call them anyway. And they're getting the message from you, we love you and we want to support you in prayer. I mean, who wouldn't feel cared or looked after if that happened? I mean, and believe it or not, you will, through the calling process, discover and respond to needs. Maybe you can see how if somebody was doing this, Janine wouldn't have fallen through the cracks. Somebody would have called and said, hey, Janine, we're just calling to see how you are and if there's anything we want us to pray for. And she could have told some of the family things she was going to. She could have said, yeah, I really need to meet with the rector and talk about my marriage. Maybe that could have, who knows? All I'm saying is, if you do this, you will make an impact in the lives of those who receive the calls. Now, I have to admit, I usually don't get telecare calls because I'm the rector. But one day, one of my callers had the courage to call me, She goes, I imagine you don't get the telecare call, but I wanted to call you and ask how you were and if there's anything you want us to pray about. And I was so touched by that because I felt like, oh, she sees me also as a member of the church who needs prayer, And we had a wonderful chat. And I thought, man, that really does feel good, to get that phone call. And this is a basically free ministry, okay? Can you see the benefits in possibly doing this? Now, the way this differs from the phone tree is this. You don't talk about anything but how are you doing? What do you want us to pray about? That's really the only question. And if they try to get you off the topic and they say, oh, well, actually, I want to talk about last Sunday's music. Talk about that another time. I'm calling to find out how you're doing and what do you want us to pray about? You just kind of deflect those questions or, hey, can you find me a substitute? I'm scheduled to usher Sunday. No, I really can't do that. But let me ask you, how are you doing and what do you want, what do you want us to pray for? Eventually, people will get it, but it's just going to shock some people. Some people say, well, where's this been for the last 2 years? Especially if you just started up, you're going to hear that. And my response to that is, this is a new ministry because we felt there was a need for this. How are you doing? What would you like us to pray about? You literally try not to explain it, just turn it back to them. And eventually they'll stop asking those questions like that. But this is an incredible ministry. And what also is I've given you, this is only 8 of them, but you've got several of these cards, and I print these out. And what you really need to do if you're going to do telecare ministry properly is you need to practice some calls. Most of the time the calls will be straightforward. A lot of the time you'll just leave a message. But on the scenarios, you really want to talk about what are the possible things that could come up. And you want to practice this. So what you literally do is you sit side by side or back to back at you get together at church and you go through this and everybody should do these ring, hello, this is Father Timothy. No, I wouldn't say that, but it's hi, this is Timothy from All Saints Church calling as the telecare ministry. Is this, I know Lynn, I'll pick on her. Is this Lynn? And Lynn says, yeah, this is Lynn. Lynn, how are you doing? What do you want us to pray for? And one of these times you'll get somebody saying, oh my God, I can't believe you're calling. My brother-in-law just was in a car accident. I'm on the way to the hospital to see him. Could you pray for him? Pray for me right now. And you do that on the phone. And you say, do you want me to tell the rector? Would you like him to call you? And you jot that down, And they may say, no, I'm okay, but just gosh, I can't believe you called. This actually works. See, that's way different from just a telephone tree calling about events or your pledge card or whatever. This is geared toward people and their needs and how they relate to the church. So you just go through the directory and when you get done, you go back and you start again. You may take a month off. Our team took a month off in between times, but you just do it, and it works. And during COVID, it was fantastic. People thought it was wonderful hearing from the church when they couldn't go to church. So what's the next steps? How do you do this? First of all, you create a ministry team and you recruit people who will call. And those of you who are in your parish, you know people who might have those gifts of being able to speak, being able to pray, being able to keep confidences. Then you figure out how big is our membership, how often should we do it. Now, our callers, I'll give you some practical things. They would call for 90 minutes, and of course it's Sun City West, so it was during the afternoon because everybody was retired, and by 5 o'clock they're not ready to talk to you because they might have had their we pour at 4 adult beverage, and so it's better to call them in the afternoon because most doctor appointments were made in the morning. You got to gear it to your congregation. If your congregation works, you call in the evening, but don't call more than 90 minutes because it exhausts you as a caller. And then in this packet that you'll get, there's a sample script. You can adapt it, but right now the script that's there, put your church name in it, but it works pretty well. And there's a bunch of prayers. And then when you get ready to start this ministry, you promote it, you talk about it. Hey, you're going to get a call from the church. And if you can call from the church, it's a good idea, especially if you have more than one line, because then you can have 2 people working at the same time. I used to do this in pairs, but it seems like everybody likes to do it individually. So I'm not necessarily sold that it has to be in pairs. But calling from the church helps because the caller ID thing, because then they realize. So you also want to keep your parish office up to date if you discover a phone number is dead or somebody said, if somebody does say, oh, by the way, I moved, I would have them really urge them to call the parish office and let them know, but you also may want to put the parish office on a note, this person moved, you may want to call them and find out what the new address is. That would be the only thing I would say that would kind of violate that only talk. In fact, I wouldn't tell them you were going to do that, just put that on the note. But no matter what your church size is, telecare ministry really works. This is an amazing thing. The key benefit is that it's learning how to be a pastor. Now, to a person on my telecare ministry calling team at my former parish, I shouldn't say in mine because it's not now, but at Advent, every one of them said they got more out of it by doing it than they thought they did for the person they called. But I know that people love receiving the calls. So even if you left a message, it meant something that, hey, the church called to check me out, just to see how I was doing. And if you have you can say, in fact, we do, and there's a script about, leaving a message. It says, by the way, if you have a concern, please call the church office and let us know, and we'll pray for that. We'll even put it on the prayer list if you want. So that is a really important aspect of this, is to let people know they can be prayed for by their church, by name if they want, or by how many of you have, just by show of hands, have Daughters of the King in your parish, just out of curiosity? That's a ministry of prayer. And our DOK, which has like 30 members, they have a discipline every day at 2 o'clock because they're retired. You're going to hear a lot of that. They stop and pray for their prayer list a couple times a day, but I know they're all trying to do it at 2 o'clock. But that's a really good thing, to pass that on to the DOK and let them pray for those people as well. So the bishop, I think, I don't know if I remember if she asked, but one of the things I'll remind you is this is the key thing. People need to know they belong, and when you do telecare, they belong. So what I want you to do right now, if you're sitting with your church at your table, I want you to take a few minutes and look at these questions. Just a few minutes. I'm going to say 7 minutes. I'm going to come back at 5 of 2. I want you to look at these questions and think about who is in your church has fallen through the cracks lately that needs to hear from you. You probably know some. Secondly, who in your community of faith can you see as having the gifts for this ministry? And then what other ideas have come to mind during this? So talk amongst yourselves. And when you're done, if you really want to get one, the coffee's out there now, but talk amongst yourselves, and I'll come back to you at 5 of 2, okay? On your mark, get set, grow. That's it. Okay, just checking with you all. I like to have an interactive conversation here. Is there anybody with a burning question that would like to go to the microphone and just ask it about this? If not, we can move on, but just by show of hands, how many of you think this is a great idea and you want to do this in your own church? All right, that's great. That's great. So what are some of the stewardship essentials that any congregation can do? Well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about some definitions. First of all, stewardship, as I said earlier, is not about raising money per se. One definition of stewardship is a theological belief that humans are responsible for the world, humanity, and the gifts and resources that have been entrusted to us. A biblical view of stewardship is utilizing and managing all resources God provides for the glory of God and the betterment of God's creation. I borrowed this from a United Methodist Church in Mesa. I thought it was pretty good about faith raising. Stewardship is faith raising, not fundraising. You know, time, talent, and treasure we've heard of, but they added terrain. Isn't that interesting? 4 T's now. Care of God's creation. What do we mean by that? Well, stewardship is living generously in full gratitude for everything that God has given us. I feel that all the time. I mean, to me, my wife and I, we are so grateful that we're even together, because I would have never met her if I had not entered the priesthood, because I was going to a retreat in Florida prior to going to seminary. I was in this parish going through the ministry of inner healing, and I was introduced to her. And we've been married 33 years. I had this amazing son who has Down syndrome. Would never have met her had I not offered my life to God. You think we're grateful? Stewardship is also a way of life. It's a spiritual habit. It's like prayer. It's like going to church. It's like reading scripture. It's like reflecting on things. It's like serving others. Stewardship is a habit. It's a spiritual practice. And it focuses on the other, the persons that God places in our lives. You know, fundraising, the difference is fundraising, you're conducting events to raise money, and sometimes you need to do that. I know that the men's club and the women's club at Advent raise money, but they also give it all away, so that's good. And they give it away to organizations outside of our church. But fundraising is defined typically as a specific event to raise money for or resources for the programs of that organization. So what would be something that we could do differently in church to make stewardship real to us? Well, first of all, make the offertory more meaningful. We kind of go through that in a hurry sometimes. And I was at a church in, I won't say the diocese, but let's say it's further south from here, way south from here. And at the offertory, after the offering was collected, the ushers put it all into this velvet bag that was tied with a gold braid cord. It came up to the altar and was rushed out immediately, and they started counting it before the Eucharistic prayer even began. And I don't know about you, but I like to leave the money on the altar and bless it with the Eucharistic prayer. We're invoking the Holy Spirit on these resources to be used to change lives, to transform lives, right? So to me, that's what I want to do with the offering. Now, I was in Tennessee talking with the congregation about the plate, and we're going to talk about this before I'm done. And they have this practice where everybody in the church says the same offertory sentence every week together. And this is it. It's on the screen there at the bottom. Say this with me. All that we are and all that we have comes from God. Let us offer our best to God in thanksgiving, remembering that God loves a cheerful giver. Wow. That's pretty potent, isn't it? So we all say that every week. And to me, this is a terrible analogy. I can't think of anything else, but it's kind of like Chinese water torture. Drip, 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 and it sinks into them. They're saying it with me. We say the same one every week. Now, already, we say the same one every week. How many of you have congregations that use walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself for us an offering and sacrifice to God? That's the default. Okay, let me tell you a story about that. I was on retreat in Upper South Carolina, and a priest at the offertory said this sentence. Jesus said, I got to get the right start here because I've been using this sentence for so long. It is the verse about with your money, you know, oh gosh, I can't believe I'm blanking on this because I did this all the time. It was, about your treasure is in heaven. So give me the starting line of that. Oh, do not store up. Okay, got it. All right. Jesus said, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not consume, and thieves cannot break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. He said this on a retreat. I sat there with my mouth open thinking, I've heard that somewhere. And I thought, that's brilliant. That is just so brilliant because it made me think about what I'm doing. So I went back to my church that Sunday. And this was the big mistake, without telling the ushers, at the 8 o'clock service, I said what I just said. Jesus said, do not store it for yourselves treasures on earth, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And the ushers are standing in the back of the church going like, he didn't say the words. He's supposed to say walk. We're supposed to walk when he says walk. But they're back there. And I'm going, come on, So he didn't say the words, So if you change the offertory sentence, please warn people who depend on the same thing being said all the time. Okay? But trust me, this thing works. All that we are and all that we have comes from God. Let us offer our best to God in thanksgiving, for God loves a cheerful giver. You think that might be a valuable thing to say week after week after week in your church? I think so. The other thing that needs to happen is what we heard today about Holy Spirit mission, is we need stories of transformation. People want to know that their giving to churches changes lives. You have those stories in your congregation, but you don't tell them. By the way, it doesn't have to be all outreach. People's lives are changed by being a choir member. People's lives are changed by going through your Christian formation classes. People's lives are changed by serving at the altar. I remember I invited a guy who's he came to church because his wife did. And I said to him, Butcher, you ought to be a crucifer. During Lent, I need a crucifer on Wednesday night. Could you do that? Because they came to the Wednesday service. So he said, well, what does that entail? So I showed him, and we got him an album, and he started doing that. And next thing you know, he became a chalice bearer. And man, that changed his life. He became so involved at the church that he and his wife wound up dedicating a new set of chalices, 4 of them, in the honor of 2 of their daughters who died at birth. And now he sees their names when he does communion. Isn't that powerful? So get people involved. Tell that story so people know that, oh my gosh, what we did mattered to those folks. So it doesn't have to just be outreach. It can be anything that you do that has an impact. Tell those stories. Every now and then do that. One church in Arizona, every Sunday, they would have a moment where somebody got up and talked about one of the ministries in their church, and today's offering is given in thanksgiving for that. Whatever it takes, but remind people that their giving matters. Well, why do you want to tell those stories? Because stories move the emotions. I get emotional just telling you stories. Stories move the emotion, and it's emotions that govern spending. How many of you have been emotionally seduced into buying something that 5 weeks later you really didn't need? Oh, somebody's brave enough to raise their hand. God bless you. God bless you. Because I know all of you are saying, yeah, I've done that. Yeah, but I'm not raising my hand. I'm not letting that guy know that I did that, but I've done that. I've emotionally purchased things. But emotions do matter. And when we tell stories, I remember being at All Saints Phoenix, and a guy got up and talked about how he and his husband joined this church and why they joined this church and what mattered to them. And I was thinking, man, I am so glad I give to this church. Because my wife and I, we tithe. We believe in tithing. I never wanted to ask somebody to do what I wasn't willing to do myself. And thank God I married a woman who agreed with that. And so I was just so fired up when this guy was telling me why he loved that church and why he gave to it. It was moving me, and I do give. I mean, we give at a great level, but it just made me feel like, man, I'm invested in that guy's life and his family's life because I give to this church. Stories inspire people to take action. If you don't believe me, look at the history of the civil rights movement this month. Okay? Because this is Black History Month, and you'll see all these programs. And man, stories were told in churches that fired up that community, that made a difference, that changed this country. Sort of, until a few years ago. But we're fighting back. We're trying to get back on the program there. True stewardship. We give from our first fruits. We don't give from what's left over. We give right off the top. That's why one of the questions I ask, I always put on our pledge card is, what do I feel God is calling to me to give off the top, in response to God's presence and gifts in my life? Give off the top, proportionally, sacrificial, trusting that God will provide for us, not for necessarily all we want, but certainly all of our needs. I'll tell you a story. There's a woman in Phoenix right now. She has disabilities. She lives in Section 8 housing. She's got other supports. She has $1,003 a month to live on from her Social Security disability income. And she's a new Episcopalian, and she tithes to that church, $100 a month. And I said to her, you're probably outgiving people here who have 6 to 10 times your salary, seriously, at this church. But she tithes. And then on top of that, she gets $25 a month to support a mission in Africa. And she never has missed a rent payment. She just knows God is going to provide for her. And that's what sacrificial giving is realizing we can give and know that God will be there for us. Proportionate. What percentage do you give to your church right now? Just take your income, and divide it. Well, first of all, take your income and divide it into your pledge, and that's your percent. There was a book written many years ago about giving in America called Passing the Plate, Why American Christians Don't Give Enough Money. And in that book, written by Christian Smith at the University of Notre Dame, he said that 1 in 5 people in this country who identify as a Christian gives nothing to any organization, not just the church, nothing. And I'm thinking, that's an odd response from somebody who thinks that Jesus gave his entire life for them, that they wouldn't give any money to anybody. But at that time, the book was published, the average gift by Christians in America was $200 a year. Frightening, isn't it? Financial planners said most Americans could double their charitable giving overnight and not see any difference in their lifestyle. And of course, the answer is because it's so miserably poor right now. We give so little. So giving proportionate, working your way up to the tithe if you want to. And by the way, I don't want you to feel guilty about not doing that. I just want you to think that's an interesting spiritual discipline. You want to grow in your faith? Start tithing. You'll grow. You'll also become a much better money manager, and you won't make those emotional purchases, okay? Because you don't really have the money to do that. But also, you'll feel great because I'm really giving, I'm investing into something I believe in. And if your church isn't worthy of somebody's tithe yet, then get after it. Make your church worthy to receive the financial support it deserves. And I'm sure they really are. You guys have a healthy diocese. When I saw how you handled the dispatch of business at the beginning, that consent docket holy cow, I turned to Keith Emerson, whose phone was still silenced then, and I said, man, this is crazy. In 15 minutes, we just did an hour of Arizona Diocesan Convention, I thought that was awesome. Now, the only reason you can do that is you're healthy. So if you're healthy on this side of things, let's get after it on the financial side of things and make these churches something that people want to support and want to go to and be a part of, to know they'll belong and that they'll change lives. Sound good? Yeah, we want people. That's fine if you want. If you feel that way. Mike Durrell said, we want to make sure our churches are worthy of people's financial support, particularly our own. We got to make it so people want to give and that you want to give and you want to be a leader in giving. And I think that's really important. Here's something that's free, as I said, free. Stewardship of Life Institute, stewardshipoflife.org. By the way, you're going to get a copy of all these slides. You don't need to take pictures, but you'll get all this. Every month you get stewardship snippets. It's a weekly thing you put in your bulletin. It's about a paragraph long. It's based on one of the lessons. It talks about stewardship in some very interesting and sometimes innovative ways. You'll get a free monthly newsletter article that you can use, but also just amazing material on their website, the Stewardship of Life Institute, absolutely free. Sign up for it. Remember, people want to belong, and your church is offering that opportunity for folks. Don't ever forget that. So let me ask you a question. What are some of the things we can do to help people feel that need to belong? Now, we talked about, stewardship, but what can we do to help people feel belong, like they belong? Well, first of all, you have to have a knockdown welcoming program for visitors. Okay, it's got to be coordinated. It has to be intentional. It has to be people who want to do that ministry. And you invite your visitors to kind of tell you stories. So how did you find us today? By the way, that'll be 99 out of 100 times on your website. So if your website isn't up and running, make sure that's going, because the website is a critical thing. Also, introduce yourself to people you don't recognize, and if they are visiting, introduce them to people that you know at church, because studies have shown if somebody feels they know the names of 6 people, they feel like they belong to that church. So you know at least the vestry members. If you're a vestry member, some of you are because you're here, so if you just introduced them to other people in the vestry, you may not know all the names of people in your church, but you still could have gotten them to feel like they knew someone. But it's really critical to make sure visitors are recognized and welcome. Not necessarily in front of everybody. A lot of people like to fly low, but have them, give them bling too. We handed out a bag that had our church name on it. We had a coffee cup, that was really a great thing. People felt they really liked that. We also gave them a list of ministries just to let them know there's 45 ministries in this parish. We want to let you know what they were about. Didn't ask them to join up or sign anything. Didn't ask them to run for vestry. Just, come and be a part of it, But be sure to introduce yourself. This is probably the number one thing that grew Advent, particularly coming out of the pandemic, and that is food and fellowship. How many of you have a coffee hour or something after church? I hope every hand goes up. You got to have some kind of welcoming. So years ago, one of the people who came to our church, she was a nurse, and she said, this is really unhealthy food that we're offering, donuts and cookies. Could we do something a little more substantial? So they started bringing some cut up fruit, and pretty soon, one thing we did right away was you had a monthly potluck. Now, how many of you have potlucks out of? Yeah, a monthly potluck. And now those are great opportunities to sit down and break bread and get to know people. But you also have to introduce yourself to people you don't know. Mary Palmer has that amazing, anybody know Mary Palmer's work, Invite, Connect? Well, she talks about the 3-minute rule, where you talk to people for 3 minutes that you don't know before you sit down with your friends that you see every week. So that's a great idea. But the potluck is a great thing. And you sit down and just talk about life over food. Now, in our particular parish, it was, Sun City West, Del Webb Retirement Community, lots of widows, widowers, and single people from divorce. Food and fellowship enabled them to have a decent, light lunch after church to talk and eat with other people. They didn't go home and open a can of soup or whatever, or have something less than that. They had a meal, and they had conversations with people. How do you pay for it? We asked for free will offerings. And if it was ever low, we'd get out there and say, this is too low. You guys need to give more. You'd spend a lot more if you went to a restaurant, and that's true, they would. And we did finally put it in the budget. But that was an investment in growing our membership. It was amazing. Food and fellowship. It was just some Sundays there'd be 100 people after church just sitting there talking to one another, enjoying the food, and enjoying each other's company. And I'm telling you, these social events are great, but this one after church particularly really helped. And we had a newcomers table, and people who were brilliant at welcoming them, making them feel welcome. I always split it around because, I'm kind of an extrovert, you might have noticed. And I would talk to people, and make sure they're all doing okay, and meet the new folks, and and help them feel like they've met the pastor, like they belong, So food and fellowship is an amazing way to help your parish feel connected, but help newcomers feel like, wow, I really want to be a part of that church. I want to belong there. The other thing that we did was had events. Now, before I got there, this started. One of the women in our church, she had this idea, let's have a free concert every month. They had a wonderful venue, that's our church, and we got that blue screen in the background there, and big sign of our church logo, Advent. And we would have groups come, and we would negotiate a price, usually about $500. Free will offering at the concert, always covered it, except the Phoenix Tenors. We had to sell tickets for that. Those guys were $2,000, but it was worth it. They were amazing. That was always at Christmas. But that concert series brought a lot of people from the community who weren't parishioners to our church. Now, those of you who live near schools, elementary schools in particular, those of you who have families in your church, you wonder, how do you get people to visit? Well, there's 4 times a year that people are wanting to go to church. Believe it or not, at the beginning of the school year, Christmas, Easter, and they want something at summer, VBS. And in Leader Resources, which is an Episcopal organization, leaderresources.org, maybe .com, I don't know, but they have a thing called Open Doors. And it's how to do outreach around those 4 events. You've blessed backpacks before the beginning of school. If you've got a neighborhood school, partner with them. What can we do? How can we give you money? Who doesn't have enough resources to buy their own books or their own new shoes or new clothes or whatever? Partner. An elementary school in the neighborhood is a godsend for you. You should be down there all the time. Hey, can we volunteer read in the library someday for kids who want to hear stories read to them? Little kids. I mean, there's all kinds of volunteer opportunities at a school if it's in your neighborhood. But partnering with a school and then have a Christmas pageant, even if you have no kids in your parish. We're going to have open tryouts for the Christmas pageant at our church. Because who comes to see the Christmas pageant? Parents, grandparents, siblings, cousins. It may be the Herdmans, it may be not, from the best Christmas pageant ever. Who cares? You're getting people into your church. And the fact that you cared about their kid enough to put them in a Christmas pageant makes them think maybe they care about me and my family if we came there. And isn't that the message you want to send? That you do care for the people who come to your church? Of course it is. So that's a wonderful way to invite people into your church. How many of you have 12-step groups to meet in your space? Isn't that amazing? I always consider them an extra congregation. I don't even try to get them to come. I just say, you're my congregation that actually knows what sin is, and you're willing to deal with it, I love the fact that you guys are open, and I just praise them, and they give us whatever to support the church for that. Another thing that our church did, and maybe you can think about something like this, something different, was to have an arts and crafts fair. And we did that for 7 years until COVID. But man, that brought 2,000 people through the church every weekend that we did that. We did one weekend from Friday and Saturday. It was amazing. And every year we pick up a family or two from the arts fair. Who knows? See your space as an asset for outreach into the community. What community groups are nearby that need a place to meet? Could you offer it to them for just a free will offering, whatever it is? Look at that as an investment into getting people that don't know about you into your doors and learning about your space. And make sure you have literature about your church, lying about, make sure they can see anything, know all about your church, how to get in, how to come, when the services are held, why they might want to come to church. One of the most interesting things we did at Church of the Advent was we offered a catechumenate. Now, very few people at that age have been unbaptized, but we did baptize somebody at the Easter Vigil last year. In 2023, but very few are unbaptized. But a lot of people haven't been in church in a long time, and our particular parish had a bunch of Roman Catholics that came to us. How many of you have lapsed Roman Catholics that come to your church? Yeah. I mean, our church probably 50% lapsed Roman Catholics. Isn't that amazing? And they loved our church because we had women priests, and they loved the fact that they could take communion. So we offered the catechumenate. And here's an interesting thing. The longer your confirmation class lasts, the longer they will stay after you're done. Not kidding you. And the reason is they built community. We ran a 6-month catechumenate, and then they were ready for when the bishop came. And people that were in that catechumenate are still actively involved, crazy involved in our church. I told you about the couple that found Advent, came to our church. She's the altar guild director, he's the treasurer. And they hadn't been in church in years until they came in 2017. And look at them now. And they went through the catechumenate 6 months. They went through EFM. They graduated from EFM. They are involved. They are getting it. And then some of you have heard the second half of Life Spirituality. Richard Rohr, his wonderful book, Falling Upward. We had a group that studied that. In our mostly seniors, 95% retired. But still, find out who's in your congregation, what would appeal to them. Find ways to get them to study at a deeper level. Help them grow their relationship with God in addition to each other. Remember, people are craving connection. And connection, which is love and belonging, are expressions of connection, are what people are looking for. So now I'm going to ask you to talk again. What practices do you currently use to welcome visitors and invite them to tell their own stories? What events do you hold that help people feel that they belong to your church, and what new events could you offer? So, at your tables, I'm going to give you a little bit longer. 2:30, is that okay? 2:30, 10 minutes. Now I'll go 7 minutes. That worked really well. 7 minutes. So at 2:27, I'm going to call you back to order. Talk about this amongst yourselves. How do we welcome visitors? How do we invite them to tell us about themselves rather than tell them what you are? Tell us about yourself. What events are you holding, and what events could you offer? On your mark, get set, grow. That got your attention. All right, about 30 seconds, okay? Just kind of wrap up your conversation you're in right now. I had an interesting comment from someone who said that they didn't want anybody to call me because it was their job to call me. They wouldn't like that. And I can kind of understand that, but if you frame it as a ministry, look, it's just a ministry. We're trying to reach out to people, you know. I think that would go down easier, you know, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. If you just kind of sweeten it, you know, we just want people to know we care about them, especially if there's something that you need prayer for. After all, if we can't pray for each other, what are we doing in the church? We're no different than, you know, friends of the library or friends of the aquarium or something like that. You know, we're here to pray for one another, support one another. There was a Christian radio station in Phoenix that was doing this. They were calling people and asking them if they had anything to pray about. And a guy told me about this at dioceses convention. I said, they're stealing our stuff. They stopped doing it, so thank God. You know, but actually, that's an important connection that people want to feel. The other thing I forgot to tell you was when the telecare people do their calls from the church, I have asked them, and I've seen them do this, even when they didn't know that I was watching. I asked them, when you're done calling, take the names of the people you called, whether you left a message, spoke to them or not. Take the names into the church, put them on the altar and pray for them, and then go home. And that's what really meant a lot to them. And they told them on the call, we're going to pray for you when we're done. On the altar. We're going to go to the altar and pray for you. Now, wouldn't that just make your socks go up and down if you knew that somebody was going to do that for you? All right. Is this working for you so far? All right, last thing here. I have a modest proposal for you to increase your giving, okay? And then I'll be done and we'll take general questions, but, go one more, please. All right, first of all, you can advance it, Susan. All right, first of all, TENS, the Diocese of Southern Virginia is a member of TENS, and Lynn Farland right up here is a member of the board, and they have amazing resources, but you have to know they provide way more than just annual programs. Thank you. They provide all kinds of training and all manner of things about how to talk about planned giving, how to recruit people for your stewardship team. I can't even begin to mention the webinars that are available to you as a member of TENS, and you all are members. There's the new password. It's coming out this week. I'm not giving it to you now because I don't remember it. I had it in order to get some material, but it's an amazing website. And if you're not utilizing it for the annual program, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go. You should go and just look at it. Look at all the things that are available, all the resources that are in their library that you can go back and look at previous newsletters and stuff. TENS is an incredible resource for any congregation. Here's the proposal. I'm going to suggest that you give away your cash every week. Now, typically, and I've talked to your treasurer here about this, typically cash in the plate, and what I mean by the plate is unidentified cash. You don't know who gave it, it's not in an envelope, it's just loose cash, okay? Because if you can identify who put it in there, it's not loose cash, it's not the plate. That'll get recorded on their giving statement. So even a $50 bill in an envelope that has their name on it, it's not in the plate, okay? That's a gift to operating, unless it's designated for some other fund. But the cash typically is a small percent of your overall year income, okay? So in our parish, we had a just under $400,000 budget in 2022, and our cash in 2022 was $8,800. Now, the reason I propose this is because there's a church in Knoxville, Tennessee, Church of the Good Samaritan, Cal Calhoun, yes, that's his name. Anyway, he took our book about making the annual pledge drive obsolete, and the justification in there is a lot longer than I want to say to you, but they took that to heart and they started doing that. And they had, he said, I think, and the first year they started, they were going to, $18,000 was what they had in cash the previous year. We're going to designate all the cash in the plate to outreach, to different things every week. And what we did was we identified a place we were going to send it, tell people it's going to go to the Humane Society or whatever, usually something that had to do with human services, but of course the Humane Society, an organization that, for instance, provides animals, dogs typically to soldiers, vets who need it for PTSD, that was a total yes, absolutely, we'll do that. My congregation, probably a third of them all serve, so anything due to vets, they put money in the plate. So we said, here's where the money's going to go, and we'll tell you how much it was the next week. So this is the pattern. You pick an organization, You tell them this is what the cash is going to. The next week, we said, last week the plate was this much money. This week, that's going to go to this organization. So and we got ideas from parishioners. Where do you volunteer right now that you would like us to give the plate? Domestic violence shelter, women's shelter. One guy, he read for the blind. He was a part of this thing that recorded. He read science articles for people who would listen to it, and said, sure, we'll send money to them. So we started doing this. And in Tennessee and in Knoxville, Church of the Good Samaritan, by the time COVID hit, that $18,000 in cash grew to over $50,000. And giving to operating went way up. I met a couple. I was there to celebrate their homecoming after COVID. I met a couple who came up to me and said, that giving away the plate thing is the reason we joined this church. We were here and we heard about that and we thought, oh, we got to be a part of this. And so they give to the plate, but they also give to the church. Now, for those of you, how many of you have people who pledge annually and pay it annually? This is a godsend. This is a huge opportunity because you're taking the cash every week. So if they're in church, they're not giving to operate anymore. They feel like they fulfilled their pledge, but they're putting money into the plate for these outreach things. So you get a lot of extra giving. So Advent went from $8,800 to last year, and they gave me the figures because, I left, $28,000. 40 different organizations benefited from the plate. And every week we talked about it. This is what was last week, this is what. And 1 week a month, and by our bylaws, I guess it is, we have money go into the discretionary fund for clergy. Then out of that, I would often support folks because nobody was asking for support. And clergy shouldn't have a huge amount of money in discretionary fund. It's given to be used. So we found a family from Rwanda that was really struggling. We started supporting them out of the discretionary fund regularly and told people about it. Make sure you tell people where this money goes. Man, this fired up our congregation so much. We had a 6% bump in operating giving, in addition to going from $8,000 cash to $28,000 because we gave away the plate. And you talk about it all the time. And one of the things I kept saying is, the only reason we can do this is because you give to operating so generously. Thank you for that giving. I kept reminding them that. Drip, 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 drip. Even if you don't think they're giving generously, you tell them that they are, and thank you for doing that. Oh, I need to give to operating. One of the most interesting stories that came out of that was I had a guy who went on his pledge from $6,000 a year to $12,000 a year. And I heard about this from the finance chair, who was a former senior warden. And I called him up about that, and I thanked him so much. And he said, well, I got to tell you, Father Dombek, because that was a mistake. I didn't really want to do that, but I'm not going to ask for it back. I was told before I left that his pledge for 2024 was $10,000. So he had gone up from 6 to 10. That's where he wanted to do it. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? So this is something that any church size can do. Ask your people, where do you volunteer? Where would you like to see us make a difference? And then what I did was I wrote a thank you. I wrote a note that accompanied the check saying, hi, this is the Church of the Advent, or this is Advent Episcopal Church. This year, we're giving away our plate every Sunday, our plate cash, to organizations in our community that are helping people. You are the designated recipient for this week, and this gift is coming to you to say, we want to partner with you, we want to support you in what you do. That's huge. They hear about your church, they hear that you give away money, that you support them, you value them. How can that can only be good press for you. You know what I'm saying? That can only be an impact that is so, it's in a sense, it's free, because that cash really didn't make a lot of difference in your budget, but boy, it makes a difference in the community, and that's what you want to do. And money helps organizations reach their goals, and it will yours too. And you'll see people come to check this out. We also got some press too, because we had a lady in our church who, I don't know what she had on these guys, but she was able to get anything she wanted in the newspaper. I'm thinking, what do you have on Steve or Chris? She just smiled, nothing, we're just friends. So that's a good thing. So let me ask you, just very quickly, at your table, how much undesignated cash does your church have? Basically, how much in your annual income, if you know, and what organizations would you like to support if you were to try this? Now, just fantasize about it now. I'm not asking you to commit to anything, but just say to yourselves, if we did this, how much money are we talking? Your rector may know, or you may have your treasurer here, And then where would we make an impact with that on a weekly basis? Now, I know one church, Tim was telling me, at St. Paul's in Norfolk. See, I got a good memory. Fulop, right? Right. So Tim was telling me they do this, but he said they don't talk about it. Talk about it. Tell people, where did it go? Where's it going to go next week? How much have we given so far this year? You know, that matters to people. For some reason, that is one thing that gets people excited. Giving begets giving. Generosity leads to more generosity. And again, remember, and because you give so generously to operating, we're able to do this. Drip, 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 drip. Just write that down. That's not in your notes, but write that down. Because you give so generously to operating, do this. And when do you think, you know, what you have is enough for a miracle? When do you think you could start this? All right, so talk amongst yourself just a few minutes, and then I'm going to wrap up, okay? 4 minutes. I appreciate the feedback I got from a lot of you. I'm sorry I didn't get to the very back because I would not get back up here on time if I did. Lynn Farland tells me the TENS login, remember there's no spaces, it's all one big giant word, capital E for Ephesians 5:2, number 5, numeral 5, :2. Capital E, Ephesians, numeral 5:2 is the password for 2024. That'll be out probably in an email sometime soon as well. I hope that this has been helpful to you. I hope you've learned something today that you can take back and use. I think stewardship is one of the best ministries going because if you believe in your church and you believe in your mission and vision, then what's more important than garnering the resources necessary to accomplish that mission and vision, right? So it's a good thing. Clergy should be excited about stewardship, to invite people to not be a slave to money. I mean, believe it or not, even non-religious people, I hate the term secular, but secular writers on generosity have talked about the magic barrier of 10% somehow just changes the way you look at your life and your money when you give away 10% of your income at minimum. My wife and I, in addition to tithing, we give to other organizations. Usually every year it's about 14-15% of our income we give away, and we wouldn't have it any other way because for us that's just our way of life, you know. And even if people give enough money to support our church, if they're not giving at a level that transforms their heart and mind, we need to inspire them to give more. And I'll give you one story as an example, and I'll finish up. This guy came to see me. He was on the stewardship committee of one of the wealthiest parishes in Arizona. And he is just a new Episcopalian, and he said, and we had never done pledging before at a church. And so my wife and I kind of like, what do we give? What do we give, you know? And he said, and we decided on $3,000. And I said, oh, that's nice. That's good. I'm sure your church appreciates that. He said, then I went to your stewardship talk and stuff, and I was really convicted about the things you said about generosity. And I talked to my wife, and we raised it to $30,000. And then he says, and I hope someday to make it a tithe. And I said to him, if you made that jump, I have no doubt you will make it to the tithe and give even more. People need to be challenged to give for their spiritual health and well-being, for their spiritual growth, not just to fulfill a budget. And by the way, we don't call it budget in Arizona. I'm not saying Bishop Haynes has to do this, but we changed that name when I got there. Financial statement of mission. Because that's what it is. It is a financial statement of mission. There's no overhead in the church. Every dollar goes to mission. Mission includes our compensation for clergy and staff. The way we do church, it's all about mission. You have a financial statement of mission, and you can share it with people. You should share it with people. Cast a vision, use narrative budget, whatever it takes. Inspire people to support your mission and vision, and you'll change your community. And give the plate away. You will not believe the difference it'll make. So, as I said earlier, connection, it matters, along with love and belonging, is why we're here and what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. So I want to thank you. Thanks, Bishop Haynes, for the invitation. Thanks for having me here to be with you again. Thank you for coming out, though for many of you, it really wasn't much of a choice. But for those of you who it was a choice, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. And I hope to see you again someday. Thank you very much.